Guys, this is May. It's a month of mental health awareness, and I got a good friend, brother with me today. I cannot say how much I've learned from John fitness wise. I've learned a lot from him about fitness, nutrition, but I've also learned a lot about just taking care of yourself and mental health and just life. I've always thought of John to be a philosopher in a really good way. And I want to say this because I think men need to hear this. John has always opened up either his schedule or his office or something that he has for me to come in and just be okay if I felt I wasn't. And John's probably one of the three men in my life that checks up on me to make sure I'm good. So I'm excited to have you guys hear from him and to follow him and to learn from him. So this is John Durrett. John, I'll let you do an introduction of yourself also.
Thanks, man. I appreciate all that. Likewise, man. I've always been a fan of yours since we met many years ago now.
Many years.
I think over 10 years ago.
I think more.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
It's funny because I was actually getting ready for work this morning. Got up, 5 o'clock, get everything ready, and I was like, "Oh, I have to introduce myself." And it was funny because I said, "Well, who do I even say I am?" And I thought, like, deep down, man, you're a philosopher. You should say that. And I was like, "Oh, this is great." I was talking with a teacher of mine years ago, and we were actually talking about Bruce Lee, and he said, Bruce Lee is a martial artist, but he's a philosopher who experiences life through the martial arts. And I really vibe with that idea. I was like, that. That's how I feel about my life, right? I feel like I'm a philosopher who explores life through a lot of the things that I do. So whether it's teaching or fitness instruction or martial arts or whatever. And it's I think it's cool to have that reframing because so often we get caught up in our titles or reputation, and one, none of that stuff matters, and two, that's always changing, right? So if I a couple of years ago I thought about and you very bravely stepped out of this realm of work, but I was almost, I don't want to say forced out of it, but I had to take a hard look at it a few years ago. And I had this weird feeling where I thought, well, if I leave coaching, who am I? What am I? And now it's a good thing to reflect on, right? Because I'm not, there's a lot more to me than that. So, but yeah. Oh, sorry. That's
cool. That's cool.
That's actually the gym phone, believe it or not.
Real life.
Right. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I consider myself definitely a philosopher, but also a teacher. That was when I went to school. I was talking with some of the guys this morning. When I went to school, my goal was to become an English teacher, and I think most of my mental health journey actually started in college. So we can actually link up with that. I think I was very mindlessly going through life in high school, and then in college, you're on your own.
Yeah.
I was on my own, and I was able to reflect more heavily on my mental health, but went to school to be a teacher, got my degree and stuff. And I remember I went to my job interview and I said, "Oh, I want to teach English. I want to be an English teacher." And I'll never forget, the person laughed and they said, "Man, everybody wants to be the English teacher. We have an opening for math. Do you want to teach math?" And so my first job teaching was middle school math.
Wow.
But it helped me understand that the part of the job that I loved was teaching, and wasn't necessarily, I like literature. I love literature. But what I didn't care enough about literature to study literature. I wanted to be a teacher. Right. And so when my job shifted and I became a coach, to me, that I was just, all right, well, I'm still a teacher, right? This is just
Absolutely.
a different thing that I'm teaching. So I consider myself definitely to be a teacher. And the cool thing about that is kind of like philosophy.
Yeah.
You can teach anybody anything. You can be a teacher in so many different areas of life that gets to travel with you and be a part of who you are anywhere you go. So it's
Now,
kind of neat.
how, so I've never known John not to be someone who's studying either to teach better, to understand better, or to just be better. Where did this hunger come from for you to do that? Like I saw yesterday, it's no surprise to me. I don't think John's gonna look at anything and be like, "How can I make this better? How can I learn it better?" You were out shooting the bow and arrow yesterday. yesterday.
Yeah.
Where did this hunger from learning come from?
You know, I think there's this idea where, um, life is so short,
Mm-hmm.
and when you look back on life, what do you want your life to look like? And I think for me, I want a lot of experiences, and I want to be able to remember those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And the way our memories work as human beings is we tend to remember novelty better than we remember. So if something is new or different or interesting, we remember it much better than if it's the same old, right? Like you don't remember how you brushed your teeth 3 days ago. You know what I mean? It's
No.
just that you probably I was half asleep. You know what I mean? Like it's like you're zoned out. But when you have things that are new or different or interesting, you remember them better. And I this all came from this idea of I want my life to have as many minutes and moments in it as possible. And I
Mm.
read this study that people who were constantly learning, so we're constantly embracing, because when you're learning, you're creating novelty, right? You're finding things about the thing that are new or interesting. People who are constantly learning tend to feel like their life is longer,
Mm-hmm.
which to me sounds like a good thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
that is good.
yeah, their life is richer and more fulfilling. So even in the things we were doing, and this, unfortunately, if people listening to this don't do jujitsu, this will be lost on them, but you'll get it. We were doing a knee cut guard pass yesterday, and Sergio taught it. And while he's teaching, I'm the guy, the demo guy, so he's doing it to me. And I think it's so easy. I've done literally thousands of knee cuts over the course of my life. I've done this move a million times. But while he was doing it, instead of zoning out and just like being the dummy guy, I said, find something he's doing that you're not doing. Make this a unique experience. Find
Mm.
something here. And I noticed the way he positioned his foot, the one that wasn't doing the knee cut, was different than what I do. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That's different. That's new. And then I went to go train afterwards. I'm out helping teach too, because I'm an instructor.
Mhm.
And I hopped in on one of the groups. I said, let me try this real quick. And I tried putting my foot where his foot was, and it was literally the difference of 5-6 inches.
Wow.
And the knee cut was so much better, so much different. And then after that, I took out this is my jiu-jitsu journal, and I
Nice.
wrote it in there, and oh, look, dude, the knee cut, And it's funny because this is my most recent journal. It's got like 130 pages full of notes in it.
Wow.
And each one of those notes, that's an experience, that's a moment in time. And it's cool because I can flip through that, and I can read a note, and I can remember sort of the part of my life, the part of my journey where I was making that discovery. And I just think that, you know, uh, Chris Smith, who
Yeah.
it's one of my biggest teachers in my life, and he paid me this compliment that I thought was so touching years ago. Maybe not even years, maybe it was less than a year ago. But I was teaching a seminar, and someone commented to him that they liked the way I teach, and Chris said that I was an excellent teacher because I'm always a student. So I think like
Mm.
the love for teaching and the love for learning are connected. Like I don't want to have this surface level life. I want to be deeply invested
Yeah.
in life. I want to be immersed in things. And I've always had that, man. And it's just like, it's otherwise you're not living. You're just going through the motions.
I love it for so many reasons because like you talked about novelty, if you don't actually push yourself to go and learn something from something you do all the time, it's gonna become like the hamster wheel of life. Like I just go to work, I do that, I do this, I do that. Now with all of that, for the audience, John also teaches jujitsu. John was my first CrossFit coach and my first jujitsu coach. So, um, John teaches jujitsu too, and for those who have never done it, let's just look at it as it can be very, very challenging, very, very complex. Uh, John has a way of breaking it down so that you can learn in stages and in steps. Have you found with jujitsu that people use jujitsu to mask their mental health?
Yeah, 100%. Or I think people use all kinds of hobbies as a way to either to deal with their mental health in both healthy or unhealthy ways, right? So I like the term mask, but I also like the idea of avoidance, right? Like instead of dealing with my issues, I'm going to go to class, and it's almost like, so let's think about it this way, right? Everybody has, one of the ways we all deal with mental health is through addictions, right?
Yeah.
In jujitsu is just another addiction, and it's considered socially, morally, ethically to be a healthy or a good addiction, but it's an addiction, you know. And I know that because Moreno, Diogo, great guy. He gave me my black belt. I remember he and I have had some really great conversations, and there was a time before he moved away. I had like a really bad bipolar episode, and he could tell something was up, and he said, "Let me buy you lunch," And we went out, we got lunch, and we talked about mental health. And he talked about sort of like, not in these words, but how he realized he was addicted to jujitsu because during the quarantine part of the pandemic, he couldn't take it anymore. And he actually had like full-blown panic attacks. And we had this really good lunch. I mean, the food was good. We had some Brazilian food, but really good conversation between two men, And he said this thing that I loved, which is he said, I realized I needed to have something and be someone outside of jujitsu. It had become such a big part of it. And he's a world champion, It had become such a big part of his life. And he never thought it would go away. Why would you, right? Until you can't do it. And that was a really cool like moment for him to realize like, oh, this has been everything for me, right? And it is how he's dealt. But he grew so much as a person because he started, and hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this, but he started going to therapy, and he started taking care of himself better, and he started being more aware of like his issues. And and he and I ended up talking a lot about stuff like that and coping with different things. And so I think it can be a very positive thing for a lot of folks, but you do run the risk of, with any addiction, I don't like using addiction as a bad word. I think we all are addicted to something.
Everybody.
And certainly my addictions saved my mental health, but you can't, it can mask it, right? Because you can sort of say like, oh, well, I have this thing that now is taking my attention. It's pulling me away from my anxiety, my depression, whatever my mental health issue is. It's pulling me away from that, and I'm now in this healthy thing. But then you have to say, all right, now that I'm here, now I need to go do the work and say, let me go back into these issues and deal with them. So I think things like jujitsu, training, CrossFit for people, sure. Definitely for some people.
Definitely.
Yeah. All of these things can help us deal with our mental health by giving us a landing zone, by giving us something to focus on that's positive. But then you still have to go back and do the hard work
Mm-hmm.
of embracing the mental side of your growth and saying, all right, well, what am I not exploring here? What am I choosing to push under the bed that this is allowing me to cover up?
What would you, there's a lot in that. How would John Durrett 2010 when I met you versus John Durrett 2024, how could you tell John at 2010 to get the help without injuring him?
Yeah. That's tough. I like looking back on that version of me because it was already a much better version. But still had so much growing to do, and hopefully the 2035 John will look back on this one and be like, he still had a lot of growing to do too. um and I was actually listening to this I'm listening to an audiobook about Confucius, and he said, like, by the time he was 60, he felt like he kind of had an idea of what was going on,
Man.
and when he was yeah, right. And he said when he was 70, he had a mix of like too old to care, but no, I think the big difference, I would try to help that John learn what that John ended up learning, which was at that point in my life. So now I'm actually a certified instructor for meditation and mindfulness. At that point in my life, I hadn't done a lot of work on that. And that was that moved the needle for me in a big way. That version of me was still very impulsive. And I still, man, and I probably always will. I still have outbursts and things where I look back and I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. I know that wasn't the right thing. But that 20-something-year-old me really didn't understand that we are not. So our thoughts don't define us, right? Mm-hmm. Our thoughts are something that happen to us. They happen in us, but they're not us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I really needed to learn. And I was still the kind of guy where I would do things or say things based on impulse or on a quick emotional thing. And through practice, I've learned to, most of the time, separate myself from the actions, from the reactions, right? And honestly, like, jujitsu helped with that, because you have to think. You have to be present. So it really helped with that. I had to learn mental jujitsu, which meditation really helped with. So I would have given myself, man, there's actually, it's funny you say that, man, because there was a book I was given on meditation around that time in my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was it called?
I'm trying to, it was like a folky, like, it was like spiritual traditions or something like that. But it was written by this guy who does he does like guided hiking tours.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And I guess as he got into that field, he met a Native American spiritual teacher who taught him like the Native American style of meditation, which is wild because it's not super different from what the Japanese do or Indians. So I think everyone who's figured out meditation has figured out kind of the same thing, core root. Yeah. But just to be able to sit alone with your thoughts, and that's such a big thing, right? Because you realize that the thoughts are like clouds, right? Like clouds, just they come and they go. There's clouds outside right now. And that's not the sky, right? The clouds are coming and going, but
Mm.
the sky is always there. And if you look at one cloud and say that's the whole sky, you're losing it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's the kind of person I was in my 20s. I was this guy where, like, if I was angry, that would become me. If
Mm.
I was stressed, that would become me. And I didn't, it took me years to understand that no, the stress, the anger, the sadness, whatever it is, that's actually not me. It's apart from me.
It's a part of
It's
you.
separate, right? It's separate. Those are the clouds. And the importance I give to that cloud and how I deal with it sort of depends on how I want to deal with it. And
Hmm.
sometimes you see a cloud coming in and you know it's going to be a hurricane or a tornado. Man, you got to deal with that cloud. You know, that's got but sometimes a cloud rolls in and you're like, oh, maybe it's going to rain. So do I need to panic, or can I say, like, and look, the cloud's way over there. It's miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to panic about that cloud, or is that something I can say, hey, let's take a chill pill here and let's realize that I'm okay. This is okay. Everything's all right. And I can manage this from a more intelligent perspective. You
I
know?
like I like that, and I think sometimes we get confused with thinking that just because those clouds are coming, that we're usually thinking that is us. I am anger. I'm
Yeah.
this, and then we try to solve that issue where sometimes you can let it bypass. I remember one time I was in a meditation class. It was maybe my first, second one, and the teacher
Yeah.
said we were next to a busy road. So she said, when you guys hear the cars go by and you hear all those things, allow it to go by. Don't fight it. Just come back to being where you're at. It's almost as if like one of the remedies for mental health, outside of therapy and things like that, could be almost sitting with your thoughts, slowing down. Why do you think that's so hard though?
I think part of it's hard because, well, it's funny. The reason I laugh is because a lot of times you hear folks say it's because it's hard because we have smartphones, or it's hard because of whatever, right? But you can read books from literally like monks that wrote this down like 2,000 years ago, and like it was hard because it's hard,
Mhm.
right? Um, I think it's a combination of things. One, I think it's a lot of work, and it's a situation where you can work, you can and you should work with a teacher, but you have to do a lot of painful, boring, not fun work on your own,
Mhm.
right? And that might involve journaling, it might involve meditation.
Mhm.
And then the other part is, like, not only is it, so it's boring because it's kind of monotonous, right?
Yep.
But it's painful. It's painful to look in, and it's debilitating to your sense of self, right? Because you're looking in and you're realizing, oh, maybe I'm not the man I want to be. Maybe I'm not the man I think I am. Maybe I'm not the man I pretend to be,
I
right?
pretend to be.
Yeah, and you have to come to terms with who you really are. And the positive side of that is the first step to becoming, in truth, the man that you want to be. And
Mm.
there's no end to that journey. You do that the
Mhm.
rest of your life, and I think of it. There's actually, I'm getting a tattoo at some point for this.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite metaphors for self work. Um, and I've heard a million versions of this story, but it's a great, any way you hear it, it's great. And so the story, the way I heard it was, there was a Zen abbot at the monastery, right? And this guy comes in, he goes, I want to train Zen Buddhism. And he goes, all right, great. And he hands him a broom and he says, go sweep the floors. And the guy goes, all right. And so he sweeps the temple, and the guy leaves and he comes back and he goes, all right, did you sweep all the floors? Yeah. All right, good. I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, so he leaves, he comes back and he goes, next day, hey, I'm back. And he goes, good. And he hands him the broom and he says, sweep the floors. And the guy's like, this goes on for days and days and days. And finally he stands up to the abbot and he goes, look, man, I'm not sweeping the floors until you tell me why I'm sweeping. And the abbot says, because we have to sweep every day, because every day dust will accumulate, right?
Wow.
And that's self-care, that's mental health, right? It's not done because the dust accumulates, right? The thing gets dirty again and you have to continue to clean it, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Is you're never, like, you're not meant to be done. You're not meant to be perfect or finished or anything like that. It's more like cleaning, where I have to, or like for me, it's a great metaphor because that's training too, right? You have to train every day. You don't just like, all right, cool, like I can squat 300 pounds now, whatever. I never have to squat again. No, unfortunately, you have to come back on Monday and do some more squats. Right? So there's this idea that, you know, I think people want to be able to write the book of mental health and publish it and put it on the shelf and say that it's done. And all of that, man, like the idea of being finished with anything is an illusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you, I mean, think about the best book you've ever read, or the best, anything, right? Whether it's a philosophy book or whatever. Like, I got this. Look, this is actually funny. These are right here, but look, this is Jocko Willink's second book on leadership. You know why he wrote this? Because the first book, which was tremendously good, a couple years later, he was like, crap, there's stuff we didn't put in there.
Yeah.
And then I have Kelly Starrett's third book, there we go, on movement, right? And it's like, because he wrote the first two, and I actually met him at a seminar 2 years ago, and he was like, man, if I could get the first book off the market, I would, like, you know. No, because and it's a good book. Like, nothing's done, right? Because we're always learning, we're always growing, and everything's always changing. So I think people are, the idea of having to work on it forever is kind of terrifying. But it's one of these things where it's like, man, what else do you have to do with your time? You know,
I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you, with, so like we know that, not because we're superior, but we just know that from just coaching, from training.
Yeah.
How does someone accept that without it becoming heavy?
So I think I'm gonna make it really light. I think, right, and a little foofy. One thing that I think a lot of, like, self-help and philosophy and stuff gets wrong is this idea of love and service. And I don't want to get, like, religious or spiritual or anything on that, but I think we are all here to serve, right? To be of service to ourselves, to be of service to others. I think that is the work of life, right? The work of life is service. I really think that. And that's fueled by a sense of love, right? And whatever it is that you love. If you love your cat and you don't love anything else, your cat needs you to show up as the best version of yourself. And that is going to require you to do the work every day, to sweep the floor every day, right? And so I think you attach to that love, whatever that love is, man. And if you only love yourself, or you love your Bugatti or whatever, like, the way that that's going to materialize and that's going to stay in shape is by you continuing to sweep the floor, do the work, and show up every day in service to whatever that thing is that you love. Now, I hope you love others. I hope you love yourself, and that those are the things you can show up for. But man, like, meet it wherever you're at. Like, you know, sit and think about, what's the thing I care about? What's the thing that I love? All right, in order to maximize that thing in my life, I have to show up and do this work. And, like, you brush your teeth because you like having teeth, you know, like, that's why you do it. You know, if teeth were useless, none of us would brush them.
None of us. No.
And so the work that we do every day is because I think we need to attach to love, right? Something that we care about. And then we live in service of that love, whatever that is, right? And I think when you couch it that way, and you know, when I journal a lot, and I try to journal every day, but I journal more often than I don't. it's bad. I journal more than I floss. I do a pretty good job flossing, but I do a better job. But you know, I think of my journaling as an act of self-care, right? Of man, you know, and I almost have this little bit of detachment, right? Of man, this guy John, he's a good dude, and I need to help him out. So we're gonna work on this journal so he can put his thoughts on paper and get things organized because I want to take care of him. Because he's the one who's going to take care of his wife, who I also care about. He's the guy who's taking care of his dog. He's the guy who's taking care of his cats, his community, his people, right? Like that dude's got to be fit to serve.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
So I have to do the work to make sure that he's fit to serve in the best way that he can for the people who matter.
That's a great way of putting it. And it's the way that goes completely against social media, which is wild to think that you arrive and you don't get better and you just take multiple days off of that's real self-care, doing the boring, like you said, doing the boring painful work and things like that.
Sweeping the floor, man. That's it.
That is sweeping the floor. I like that. I like that a lot. Have you found with now you're a black belt, now you run so much of the gym, you're a big part in other communities like power athlete and things like that. Have you found that you taking your own mental health journey in your hands and getting it in control has helped you serve other people?
Absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't be possible without that. And it's funny for a couple of reasons, because to sort of bring everything full circle, you know, I didn't go to school to be a coach. I mean, I went to school to be a teacher, so I guess kind of, right? But like, I went to school with zero intention of doing strength and conditioning, and now I've been working in the field for 15 years. I have one of the highest accreditations you can have, but I never want to lose. I always feel like a phony, and I love that. I love feeling like a phony. I love that chip on my shoulder, man. That little demon in my ear that tells me like you're not. People see it as a bad thing. I love it, man. I love the voice that tells me you're not good enough, right? And someone else out there is hustling harder than you and reading more books and studying more and doing more. That keeps me so hungry in such a good way. You know, so that idea of like being a phony, right? That's such a good fuel for me. And that, so when I go to coach people or help people or work for a power athlete or for the gym here or whatever, people come here and they expect and they deserve me to be an expert in the things I am professing to be an expert in. People deserve that, right? And if I'm going to ask them to spend their hard-earned money here, or if I'm going to ask them to trust me, like I need to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that I can at least back it up. You know, I talk a lot about coaching, and when I teach coaching, which I do also teach coaching, which is fun. There's an Aladdin moment, and I like this phrase, this terminology, because I don't know if everyone's seen Aladdin, right? Everyone's seen that movie. There's a scene where he gets the magic carpet and he goes to pick up Princess Jasmine, and there's this amazing interaction there where he says, like, "Do you trust me?" You know, and that's my favorite part of the whole movie. And there's a bunch of good parts in that movie, but that's my favorite scene, because there's this moment where, because now I'm going to bring it back full circle again, Drew. That trust is founded in love, and that's the beginning of trust, right? So again, we're looking back on this idea of this is all just acts of love and acts of service. Trust is part of that. And if I'm not really doing my best to improve, to be better, to be the best possible person I can be, it is uh, horrible for me
Mm-hmm.
to ask others to trust me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I have to keep going. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think about that all the time, because there are days where, you know, tired or whatever, and I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
train, or I don't want to read, or I don't want to keep studying whatever it is that I'm doing. But I just, it's not about what I want. It's about, like, this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm not here to do this half-heartedly, right? I'm here to do this completely. And it all comes down to put in the work.
That 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 sums it up. I'm pretty sure we're gonna hear from John again in a different episode because I love hearing his ideas and hearing him talk. But he said something that made sense. This self work and things like that, it gets overlooked because it's not as sexy as what people are painting self care to be and things like that. But you'll have a longer, more fulfilling journey, and you'll touch a lot more people being that honest with yourself to sweep the floor daily. So, John, how can the people who don't know who you are, how can they get in touch with you and how can they find you?
Man, I'm always around to talk. I guess the only social media I have anymore is Instagram. And I grapple with that all the time. Yeah, my Instagram is Johnny Johnnny Durrett Durrett. And that's like an easy way to reach me. But also, like, I mean, people can email me, man. My work email is John at underdogmma.com. It's where I work, Yeah, it's and I hope people, if they want to reach out, they do, because always open to talk. I think
He's a wealth
it's
of
fine.
knowledge, man. Well, John, I can honestly say I've never in my life, and it's a big blessing. So when I say it, it's definitely a compliment. I never talked to John and felt like he was in five other places. Like he was present, he was listening. If it was advice or suggestions, he was present there with you, and it's remarkable because we all know people. When you're talking to them, you know you're not talking to them. You're talking to them and wherever else they are at. So if you guys do get a chance, definitely go link up with John. I'll make sure to put the stuff inside of the show notes. John, I'm pretty sure we're gonna talk. You'll see me back at the gym soon. My schedule is making a good change so I can get in and come hang out and train. But John, thank you so much for taking the time today, man.
Anytime, man.
Take care, my man.
Yeah, be easy.